Yo, what up, everybody? It's your boy Carson Fox with another special edition of Fox on West Virginia Mountaineer Sports. And I just got to say, to lead off this show, it is a wild time to be a West Virginia Mountaineer fan for a number of reasons. Obviously, it is roster management season here during the month of December. It's a wild time between the end of the regular season to a bowl game with the transfer portal opening up, early signing day period for this class of 2024 high school recruits. Again, trying to prepare for a game here in just 13 days. Before then, we get to a national championship. The transfer portal is going to close, and we're on to 2024. So it's a wild time. So let's break it all down talking about today's show. I'm going to be talking a lot about recruiting and retention as it pertains to the transfer portal and what West Virginia, in tandem with Country Roads Trust, is doing right now. We're going to talk about what's been the news in the last week with the Duke's Mayo Bowl, because, again, West Virginia plays a game in 13 days. So I can't wait to break that all down for you all on Tuesday, December 26th after Christmas. So we'll talk about that game and that matchup, which is just evolving by the day with everything going on with opt-outs, injuries, transfer portal, you name it. So, and then, of course, I want to touch on this West Virginia basketball team with everything that's happening off the court is more important, it seems like, than what's happening on the court. So we'll talk about that at the end. So since the last show, the commitments, and I guess now we have another week's worth of evidence with this. So it's true that Country Roads Trust now is announcing these players' NIL deals, which I guess that as fans we have to assume that is their official announcement that they are coming back to the team for 2024. And that's just so weird. But that is so 2023 college football that, like, you think when a high school player commits on signing day, that's it for 4 years. You got them in on your team for the next 4 years. It is a year-by-year, case-by-case basis with today's rules of the transfer portal. So you have to have a third-party outside collective announcing that players on your football team are coming back individually for the next season. It's just wild. It's just absolutely wild. So the new ones that have come up in the last week are quarterback Garrett Green, who was announced today, who made a verbal commitment, just like 10 days, 2 weeks ago or so on the Three Guys show with Tony Caridi, Hoppy Kirchville, and Brad Howe. But I guess by today's Twitter post, it's official in writing. Linebacker Ben Cutter, linebacker Trey Lathan, offensive lineman Johnny Williams, offensive lineman Nick Malone, offensive lineman Nick Crahey, running back Jaheim White, and wide receiver Rodney Gallagher, joining wide receiver Traylon Ray, tight end Cole Taylor, linebacker Josiah Trotter, offensive lineman Wyatt Milam, offensive lineman Tomas Remak, Brandon Yates, offensive lineman, and wide receiver Preston Fox. So right there, that makes up a bulk of that indispensable list that I talked about following the Baylor game. I mean, right then and there, you have a core already committed for 2024. So, just a few players at this point in time I'll talk about in a second that I guess that I'm still watching, and we'll talk about that with, the guys on transfer watch. But a lot of offensive players that you can see in that list and have already been committed. Fewer, especially at two position groups, secondary and defensive line, that has been not really talked about or not announced. So the transfers out of the program in the last week: Lance Dixon, Keyshawn Cobb, Justin Johnson, James Hurd, Mike Lockhart, and Danny King. Joining Andrew Wilson-Lamp, Hershey McLaurin, Jashawn Polk, Davis Mallinger, Christian Stokes, and Jeremiah Aaron, who we talked about on the last show. So I won't really talk about them, but I want to talk about these new players that have entered the transfer portal. So I guess, like, the craziest news with everything that's guys like on transfer portal watch, transfers coming or they're committing for next year, and then guys who are transferring out. I got to give a huge shout out on Twitter to user Huddy Tuddy Season. His handle is at TrustTheClimb23. This dude, I don't know if this is Neil Brown or a player's burner or somebody from within the athletic department, but this guy's followers has more than doubled in the last week, and it's because he's got the scoop. I mean, he was it seemed like first on the prowl for a lot of this news that's happened in the last week, namely on the case with Mike Lockhart, and then allegedly on an injury to C.J. Donaldson, which we'll talk about when we talk about the bowl game. But I got to give it to him. So Huddy Tuddy Season, man, he knows his stuff. Great follow. I've been following him all week and like the comments that have come up on his tweets and things. So I got to give a shout out to him for this. But talking about those players who's transferred out, Lance Dixon has really been off the team since the Houston game when he allegedly snuck a girl into his hotel room overnight. I think behind Andrew Wilson-Lamp, he was the biggest liability on the team, so good riddance. I'm glad he's gone. I think he took a major leap backwards, really more so in 2022, after showing some signs of promise in 2021. But then in 2022 kind of got that weak side outside linebacker position, was so bad there, they pushed him back into the last level and tried him out at safety. That really didn't necessarily work. So, I called this preseason that I thought Anthony Wilson was going to pass him up at the spear safety position. And when that happened, which was as soon as Penn State week 1, I think he really cost West Virginia in that botched kickoff return coverage at Houston on Matthew Golden's kickoff return for a touchdown. I talked about that in the post game. You just saw Lance Dixon fly in on the play, smash the blocker in front of the guy with the ball, almost as if he had the ball, totally ignoring the guy with the ball coming straight at him. And it just got me thinking, like, what was going on that play? So I would really question where Lance Dixon's head's been at for, this entire season at least. I kind of thought that he might have been a player to watch to transfer last year, but now he's gone. So sayonara, Lance Dixon. He's probably going to go play somewhere in like the FCS or whatever because he's already transferred from Penn State. Couldn't make it there. Couldn't make it at West Virginia. So who knows where he's going to play next. The next one, same position, Keyshawn Cobb at safety. This one I thought was a bit of a head-scratcher to me, given that he only played in 2 games this season, got hurt in the Duquesne game, and missed the entire year. So you thought, okay, he'll come back, for next year. And with the absence, of Christian Stokes, I almost kind of forgot about Keyshawn Cobb, to be honest with you, in a couple of my last videos, that he was going to be around for next year. But he has the opportunity, I feel like, to compete for a starting position and decided to portal anyway. I'm going to guess that this has to do with him, overvaluing his perceived worth and potential. Maybe a guy, I feel like, if he doesn't necessarily get it on the open market, again, he transferred up from Buffalo, came to West Virginia, didn't really show anything in 2 games. So does he want to go back down to the G5 level, or does he want to come and compete in a starting position at the P5 level, or P4 now? So didn't understand that one. I think it's a money grab here, so we'll see what happens with Keyshawn Cobb. Now, this was the biggest one, right up there with Hershey McLaurin. I don't think that this player was necessarily indispensable, but this is deja vu all over again, considering it coming at the position of Jordan Jefferson, who left last year. So defensive lineman Mike Lockhart, starter all 12 games this season. Allegedly, again, offered $60,000 in NIL money for this upcoming season, and he turned it down. So he's going with that whole Jordan Jefferson approach of going elsewhere after becoming a starter. And hopefully, I think that he could even be better next year in his final year in Morgantown, but he'll probably become a backup at a top Power 5 program somewhere like Jefferson was at LSU. So what I'll say on this with Lockhart is I'm going to trust in general manager Drew Fabianics negotiating. Same reason with Cobb here. Lockhart's transfer, I think, presents a huge opportunity for current guys. Fatorma Mulba will probably get the start in the Mayo Bowl after this transfer by Lockhart. Hammond Russell, Corey McIntyre has been talked about ad nauseum by Neil Brown over the second half of the season on the scout team that a lot of the true freshmen play on, who aren't necessarily going to be starting on Saturdays. So I think it begs the bigger question, do guys like Asani Redwood and Tamia Durage put on weight to play at that nose tackle position next year, given that they both weren't really starters this year? If you have Sean Martin on one side, Eddie Vesterinen, do one of those two guys try and play at that nose tackle position if West Virginia stays with this quasi 3-3-5 scheme that they have? I don't know. I doubt it. I think those guys are more so meant on one end or the other rather than inside. I think you want a guy who's, somewhere 310 or above, and Redwood's really close to 300, and Durage is listed, I think, in 285. So I don't know if that's necessarily the right move. What I'm very interested in is West Virginia's old pal out of the 2023 recruiting class, former 4-star defensive tackle Justin Benton, who on signing day had the flip, did a little switcheroo. Dana Holgerson and Houston's collective, I'm sure, swooped in with a big bag of cash and said, "We want you." And Justin Benton on signing day, after also visiting Arkansas, also visiting Texas, and really flirted with those teams the entire recruiting process after visiting West Virginia in the summer of 2022. Ended up deciding to flip to Houston out of nowhere on signing day, goes there, now he's in the portal after just a single year. So did he burn any bridges with the coaching staff to not, that they don't want to negotiate with him, they don't want to bring him back onto this team, see him as a cancer, let him go somewhere else? I don't know. I very much saw Justin Benton almost in the same vein as like a little Glenn Dorsey. I know that's high praise given how great Glenn Dorsey was for LSU back in the day, but I just see how fast, how strong. He's a little short, but that's okay. People said that about Darius Stills, and look what he did for 4 years in Morgantown. So I'd love to get Justin Benton in an old gold and blue uniform, plug him in there, and I don't think it's going to make much of a difference between him and Mike Lockhart. So with the other guys that you have on the defensive line that you can kind of rotate in, and we've seen how Brown likes to do that, and Leslie likes to do that on the defensive side. So that's all I got to say about Mike Lockhart. I think he's gone. I think the ship has sailed on that more so than compared to Cobb, but we'll see. Another head scratcher in a similar context, I feel like, as Cobb was linebacker James Hearn Jr., because with Rodney Gallagher, Traylon Ray, and Josiah Trotter, he had heard was one of the 4 stars, the 4 stars of the 2023 class. I thought it was a little strange that we didn't see him deployed this season in any obvious passing down defensive packages after the coaching staff called him the team's best natural pass rusher this past spring and summer. And then I thought once we got into the Final 4 games, maybe they just want to preserve his red shirt. But again, if you saw, we would have seen Trotter had he not torn his ACL in the spring. We saw Ray a lot. We saw Rodney Gallagher a lot. So why didn't we see Hurd at all? Is this over money? I don't necessarily think so. Right before I got on to record this video, I saw On3 reporting that he's going to take a visit to Syracuse. I don't know why you'd want to go to Syracuse. Unless it's just for playing time. Or I'm just throwing this hypothesis out there, does he not see himself in his skill set being best utilized in Jordan Leslie's scheme at the bandit position? At 6'2", 230 pounds, I don't think he's heavy enough to ever be a down 4'3", and what I'm hoping West Virginia could go to, or 4'2", defensive end. But that's probably where his skill set best translates. Now, Bruce Irvin was a bit of a one-trick pony, if you want to call him that, but he was arguably the best pass rusher West Virginia's ever had. So that's kind of where I could see the mold for James Hearn Jr. is using him in on pass rushing downs at that bandit position. But as I said recently, and kind of been a theme, is I don't understand this bandit position in Jordan Leslie's scheme. And I think this is really personified, and this was an article that came out just a few weeks ago. It was right before Thanksgiving. I found it, WVU Metro News. I think it was, I don't know the article or author off the top of my head. Hold on. Let me just grab it. But it was just a really strange article. Yeah, it was Greg Carey of WV Metro News, and it was just talking about how Jarrett Bartlett doesn't necessarily do anything in this offense that pads stats or collects stats, and, Bartlett's quoted throughout it just saying like, oh, I got to do what I got to do to, to help out the team defense. And if it's me not necessarily collecting stats, but someone else makes the play because I do my job and take on 2 blockers, like that's great. And that's what like I'm saying with this bandit position is it's so reactive, it's so passive, it's usually to the opposite of the strong side or where you're expecting the play to go. So it's not on the play side. Leslie doesn't rush it as much as I really think that West Virginia should. And that's partly to do because of the Big 12 offenses and the RPOs and all that. But I really do think that this bandit position in this scheme as a whole, I don't think in this case, James Hurd Jr. saw an avenue for him to get onto the field next year, even in a pass rushing specialist type of position as a redshirt freshman. So I'm very confused. I don't like that transfer. I don't feel good about it. And I think there's some more context that I'd love to know more about what happened with her. So if anybody out there is watching this video, please leave your comments or catch me on Twitter. I'd love to know what are the details. Or if Huddy Tuddy season's listening, like what's going on? Why did Hurd transfer? At the running back position with Justin Johnson, I called this weeks ago. I feel like even mid-season, being passed up by C.J. Donaldson last year and now Jaheim White on the depth chart this year. I think he saw the writing on the wall with only 1 year left of eligibility. He wasn't blessed with the red shirt that Jalen Anderson was, and I think Jalen Anderson's going to be hitting the portal after the Mayo Bowl, joining Johnson. Now, why I give a lot of credit to Johnson for sticking around for 3 years, trying to make it work, trying to get his opportunities, and every single time, opposed to I think Anderson, who really cost West Virginia a couple of times. UCF game with that major fumble, with the botched catch in the end zone, which would have went for a touchdown against Houston, or was it Oklahoma State, or one of those 2 games. Johnson, every time he got in there, he was a positive compliment to whoever held down the top spot. If he was either just a step faster to be more elusive or 10 or 15 pounds heavier to break more tackles, I think he'd be worth being like a number 1A or a 1B starter. So he'll probably go to a lower level P5 team or a G5 contender. I know he's from St. Louis, so if he goes to one of those like Midwestern schools trying to go closer to home, shout out to Justin Johnson. Really appreciate you being a Mountaineer. Hope you go out there and you go get it somewhere. Similarly to like Tony Mathis, have no ill feelings at all toward Justin Johnson and his transfer. Totally get what you got to do. And then kicker Danny King. I think with Michael Hayes having 1 more year of eligibility, the writing was on the wall for him to go and start somewhere else. So if he wanted early playing time, go get it, young man. So good for you. Now, this is the scuttlebutt. This is the rumors. Again, first started up by that Trust the Climb 23 Twitter account on Tuesday night. A guy that's on transfer watch is safety Aubrey Burks. Apparently, this is allegedly, again, can you wholeheartedly trust what you see on Twitter? Not always, but this guy's been right so far. So if he's hot on the trail, Burks has cut his stuff about West Virginia off his Instagram account. I'm not much of an Instagram user, but when I heard that, I switched over onto Instagram to see, and it's true. He still has the stuff on Twitter, but it just seems like most younger folks these days use Instagram more so than they use Twitter. Some not. But apparently he's being pursued by Ole Miss and their safeties coach. So tampering, once again, just like Akeem Mesidor, just like Tyke Smith, just like Daryl Porter. So this really, I think, presents an opportunity because I guess Burks has been at practice these last 2 days and for bowl prep. The opportunity for Country Roads Trust to present a matching offer to keep him there. I feel like Burks, who is a guy who's been around, would be going into his 4th year, so his senior year next year, has to see the writing on the wall that this program is in such a better place with the trust compared to 2-3 years ago. This could be a conference contending team with his services and all the other guys on the indispensable list for next year, and WVU is going to have at least 2 guys drafted this year in Beanie Bishop, who was just named a consensus All-American, the 13th in program history in that defensive backfield, and Zach Frazier. So, like the momentum, I feel like, for this program is coming along, and Burks has to see that. He's a captain. He came with Brown and the other team captains for Big 12 Media Day this past summer. Got all the recognition from Pro Football Focus a year ago. Went out there. I don't think necessarily this year was as good as last year for Burks, but played admirably. Also suffered with that scary neck injury from the TCU game. So if the money's comparable, does Aubrey Burks have enough faith in this program that this is the best place for him to finish out his college career? If the two sides, Ole Miss and West Virginia, are tens of thousands of dollars apart, or for whatever reason Burks doesn't believe in this program or his coaches or whomever, that's the way that things go in today's world of Power 5 college football. That if he wants to go to the SEC and follow in the same footsteps as Drashun Miller or Jackie Matthews, that you win some, you lose some, and your teams, if you're in the middle class, I mean, even a team like Oklahoma this week lost practically its entire starting offensive line to the portal. So it's happening to everybody, from players who are not in starting positions at blue blood teams, or these blue blood teams can't keep up with the donor fatigue to keep their payrolls as high as they need them, that they're going to let depth pieces. You can't stack depth anymore. That's the problem. That's the problem with today's world of the transfer portal, is you cannot stack enough depth. It's when the depth gets depleted and you're working all your way up to your starters and you're backfilling. It can get chaotic, and that's exactly what happened 2 years ago. You can remember in 2021, also affected 2022, I feel like, to a certain extent, and it's just happening all over again. You have to, this just goes to show, and I know that, who knows, Burks might stay. But this is just a case in point example of one player. We just, as a fan base, I feel like, have to continuously encourage the big time donors to get on board with Country Roads Trust and reallocate their giving, albeit non-tax deductible in this case, to the trust instead of the Mountaineer Athletic Club. Because what the Mountaineer Athletic Club takes care of, predominantly scholarships, but also facility improvements, capital projects, capital campaigns. Travel and recruiting enhancements is the language that's used on their website. I don't necessarily think it's wrong for the Mountaineer Athletic Club donations to be attached to season ticket holder packages. Or even if you want to do those mini packages, so be it. I get it. That's what every college does across the country. So if you're not going to change that, you can keep that. But that it's not making the kind of impact that it used to with facilities and scholarships. Come on, it's NIL dollars are the name of the game in today's professional football world of college football. And I know that it's a drain, but look what one interview by Brandon Phoenix of the Raspy Voice Kids with Amanda Mazey just a couple of weeks ago did in tandem with the launch of the transfer portal for this offseason has done. Country Roads Trust has doubled its membership So, wow, it just takes people like me, it takes people like so many others to continue to spread this word, to educate, re-educate, tell more, talk and more about it, that West Virginia has to put into, our fan base has to put into this trust, because that's what's going to affect this football team and this basketball team and keeping J.J. Weatherholt on the baseball team. So, every school out there who hasn't made its facility improvements, and I feel like that's why University of South Florida just put its $500 million construction project of a new stadium on hold, saying it won't be done until 2027. I'm so thankful that all of the upgrades to Milan Puskar Stadium, to the Coliseum, the building of Monongalia County Ballpark, all happened before July 1st of 2021, because it's NIL is the name of the game, and until any sort of rules come down from a governing body, like this new subdivision that has been pitched by President Charlie Baker of the NCAA, we talked about on last episode, so go back and watch that episode if you don't know what I'm talking about, is this super conference that could potentially be coming, in which $30,000 payments are the baseline floor for every player across men's and women's athletics within an athletic program. So, guys who are potentially transferring in, it's hard to keep up with this, because as I said on my last video, and it's really gone fast this week, and I think it'll continue to go fast next week and pretty much the whole month of January. I don't know how Neil Brown and his staff are doing this. I mean, they got to be sleeping practically 2 hours a night between what they're doing with the transfer portal recruits, what they're doing, or maybe just new people are being involved into the conversations that haven't been involved before, and more players are being involved with the recruiting process. We saw that with basketball with Jose Perez this past offseason. Drew Fabianich has maybe taken more of a lead role, I feel like, with the transfer portal recruits in comparison to Brown and the assistants. I don't know how that's all evolved. I'd love to know more about it. But again, keeping track of these guys, the visitors, is the most important thing. Again, West Virginia can offer every kid that comes into the transfer portal. Doesn't mean that interest is reciprocated by the player. So the only way that they really show interest at this point in time is by visiting. So that's how we can gauge it, is by how many visitors. I don't know if Devin Carter took an official visit to West Virginia, thinking back on last season, or if that was all undercover discussions about NIL. I don't remember last February how that all went down, but just for now, you can watch the offers. Are those important? Because that's what first initiates the interest. I'm going to talk about one that's very important, but we got to talk about the visitors, and that's what I'm trying my best to necessarily track. And I got to give a shout out to Justin Walker over at Couz's Corner. Watch one of his episodes earlier this week, and talking about two guys I'm going to talk about now. Go watch his video if you want to learn more about redshirt sophomore cornerback from Duquesne, Aiden Garnes. I remember talking about him from the preview video I did before the Duquesne game, and also Villanova defensive back Devin Marshall, who West Virginia was the first to contact in the first 30 minutes of him entering the transfer portal. Big time recruits at the FCS levels. So Couz breaks those down really well. Also a guy who unfortunately chose Texas Tech last night was Devin Cromwell, who visited this past weekend from the University of Guelph. Never heard of that before. From Canada, had 3 years of eligibility. So darn, it would have been nice to get him into the program and develop him. But instead chose Texas Tech. Garnes and Cromwell visited this past weekend. Rivals Crystal Ball projects Garnes to commit, and he already tweeted earlier this week that he wanted to commit on, I think, December 20th, so that'll be next week. I think in honor or in homage to his grandfather. Don't know the backstory there, but I guess that's a silent commit. I think Shadon Brown tweeted a let's go Sunday or Monday, so pretty sure that Aiden Garnes is going to be a Mountaineer very soon, and if so, I think he would be a nice fit at that number two or three corner, alongside Jacoby Spells, alongside Montre Miller if he gets a medical red shirt to come back. Apparently, also, I can't confirm this one, but checking through social media with John Carlos Miller, a sophomore tight end from Elon, who had just 25 catches, but for 453 yards and 4 touchdowns this year. Excuse me, 6'5", 240-pounder from, again, Elon. I don't know why West Virginia needs 9 tight ends on its roster whenever its safeties are getting depleted by the transfer portal. So don't understand the philosophy there. Haven't understood it for the last couple of years, why you need so many tight ends, but so be it. Couple of guys that West Virginia is hosting apparently this weekend. Gerald Kilgore, from a defensive back from Tennessee Tech. Michael Murata, a center from Valdosta State. So, wow, I think they're Division II. And then also, I think it was either today or it's happening like over the course of this weekend, but defensive back Cameron Martinez and linebacker Reed Carrico from Ohio State, so of all programs, we're visiting either, again, today or happening tomorrow into the weekend. So interesting smattering we see here of guys, across all levels, predominantly FCS. Then talking about Marshall, who Kuz talked about on his show, big-time offer. West Virginia wanted to get him in. I think he's taking 3 visits. I was just checking Twitter before I started this show that he was going to be taking it. So taking 3 visits, all at Power 5 programs this weekend. So let's see if West Virginia can get a hold of Devin Marshall. Now, I'm going to trust Drew Fabianich. I think that he has a master plan for roster management. I think it's very important. This is his first year. This is where he's going to make his mark. He has 20 years of scouting experience and already spoke eloquently about West Virginia's team throughout this season. So this is where I feel like he's making his money, is with this transfer portal recruiting and retention right now. So managing the current roster and managing what they're doing in transfer portal recruiting. So I already talked about how I want Benton. I do think that it's important for West Virginia not necessarily to skimp on just getting FCS and G5 guys as starters, because we all saw how that played out in 2022 when West Virginia rolled out Rashad Ajayi and Wesley McCormick at cornerbacks 1 and 2, and how West Virginia just suffered through that with its pass defense all season long. Now this year, they went and I think they spent the money. They went out there, they got Montre Miller, who had a higher Rivals grade than Charles Woods. So in Rivals terms, you upgraded at cornerback, and then you also went out there and you got Beanie Bishop, who was probably the steal of the transfer portal this past year. So an absolute gem and a find from the University of Minnesota, and was awesome. So it just goes to show, you can't go and just you can't go out there. You got to be very, very good on this. This is very important. This is as important, I feel like, right now with what happens, especially if Burks leaves, of how West Virginia replaces its secondary moving forward over the course of this next month, and then again when the second wave of the portal happens in the spring. But you also can't necessarily go and get Power 5 guys who aren't going to start, because you're risking transfers from guys who are currently on the roster. So like I said, it's impossible to build depth in today's world of college football. You got your starters who are all paid NIL dollars. You have guys who are probably, freshmen, redshirt freshmen, sophomores who see on the horizon, and trusting into the program. Maybe they got paid well coming out of high school with NIL dollars. So it's I know I need to necessarily get stronger. I know I need to get faster. I need to learn the playbook. I got to get bigger. But I'm going to start within a year or two. So that's your second string, are those young guys. And some, like Hurd, who aren't going to buy in. And then there are some guys like Nick Crahy, who's I know my time is coming. I know it's coming very, very soon. So, or Johnny Williams in their cases on the offensive line. So I just think West Virginia's got to be careful with its way it's recruiting, and there are some players at positions I don't think that West Virginia needs to necessarily, like tight end, need to go out there and spend time and resources on recruiting that position. But You look at the defensive side of the ball, and it's like, especially if Burks leaves, you're replacing 2 starters at safety now that Hershey McLaurin and Keyshawn Cobb have left, and you're already having to replace a cornerback due to Beanie Bishop and Malachi Ruffin graduating. I still think on the offensive line, we haven't heard necessarily a commitment from Jaquay Hubbard just yet. We did from Brandon Yates. And then also, who is West Virginia going to replace at either center for Zach Frazier, who's going to the NFL draft, or Doug Nestor, who also might be going to the NFL draft, but definitely has used all of his college eligibility. So I wonder if with that Murata visit, West Virginia is trying to get a center in to then leave Yates at tackle. I don't know. That's still to shake out. I won't comment on that just yet until, we see what happens with who commits and who West Virginia maybe misses on, and then who they retain. So, but I just think they look good across the offense other than that offensive line. I love what they have at wide receiver, and I totally forgot Hudson Clement when I was talking about that in last week's video. I don't think you need to necessarily, so I disagree with Neil Brown on this, that you need to go get a proven number 1 wide receiver. If Ja'Cory Macklin out of North Texas wants to come here for a reasonable price, love to have him, but I'm really comfortable with Traylon Ray, Hudson Clement, Preston Fox, Rodney Gallagher, E.J. Horton, Brandon Raymond, a true freshman, and Jarrell Williams next year is West Virginia's 7 wide receivers. And they're going after a guy I'll talk about in a second also to potentially add, who's another true freshman. But on the defensive side of the ball, and I also just saw right before I started the show a tweet from Tamia Durage with like a broken heart, sad face. So something's happening. Something's happening as we speak right now that I'm not aware of necessarily, but something's going on this defensive side of the ball. Whether it's Burks leaving or, someone else, I don't know. But on the defensive line, I do feel good about Sean Martin. I think he's a defensive captain for this team next year. Feel good about that linebacker position once Lathan and once Trotter come back and healthy. We already talked about the secondary, but on the defensive line, I think some figuring out needs to happen necessarily. Again, Mulba, Vesterinen, Durage, like those guys to fit, or they seem like fits for starting positions. Guys who I feel like West Virginia could recruit over is Zyke Lawton. Haven't seen him for 2 seasons now. Going to be a 4th-year player in this program. Braden Dudley, same thing with him. And Hammond Russell played sparingly here and there, but again, I think he's going to be a 4th-year player, and he's nothing better than going to be a second stringer. So can you go and find some guys who can not only clog up the rushing lanes, but get after the quarterback? A guy like Justin Benton, I'd really like that. So I'm watching always, 300-pound guys on the defensive lines always have me smiling from ear to ear. So I'd love to see that for this program. Again, I just think it's very early. But we're already seeing a lot of movement. I mean, started off the biggest move, I feel like, of the transfer portal for the entire season. Oklahoma's Dylan Gabriel going to Oregon. Riley Leonard moving from Duke to Notre Dame. Wide receiver Deion Burks from Purdue going to Oklahoma. So the prom dates are starting to pair up in the transfer portal. So West Virginia has got to go 100 at time speed, and then they got to go 0, and they got to nurture this. It's a fluid situation with this roster and how it's built. And obviously the emphasis being on retention, but in those areas where you're not retaining, then you got to go out there and you got to make some splashes in the transfer portal. So, and also a question, I'd love to know this answer, and I don't know if we'll get to know this answer for some time, but has the cost of West Virginia's current roster gone up, those individual players for the total payroll? Or no, the individual players cost more. Has West Virginia added to its war chest, thus having a higher payroll for this roster? Do they have enough money? Where are they in terms of how they're competing with others in the Power 5 in the transfer portal recruiting? Unknowns at this point in time, and we can only just make speculative conclusions at this point. So just things that I'm telling you at least that I'm tracking. As for early signing day, that'll be coming up next week, Wednesday, December 20th. I'll bring you a show at the end of the evening after all the fax machines, if people even still use fax machines. I guess they just do it one day for signing day for football and other sports. I'll talk more about this high school class of 2024 on that show. For now, just one recruit I want to give a shout out to that West Virginia is going after. 4-star wide receiver Rick Darius Farmer, 6 foot, 165 pounds, so really skinny. Out of Melbourne, Florida, was committed to Pitt last December through August, has been committed to UCF since August 1st. Recently took an unofficial visit after officially visiting apparently this past summer, so he's on flip watch. Also, running back Trayvon Dunbar, 3-star, 5'10", 205-pound running back out of Aiken, South Carolina. Is the staff anticipating Jalen Anderson hitting the portal? So if you have Jaheim White, C.J. Donaldson, who's yet not necessarily committed to the trust, at least publicly, you have DJ Oliver, who redshirted this year, Dior Hubbard, true freshman. Now you get in Dunbar. That'd be 5 running backs on the roster for next year if West Virginia got his recruitment. And then another offensive lineman, a 2-star but 6'7", 265 pounds, so thin. Offensive tackle from Sterling, Illinois, Lucas Austin, got 2 first names. Visited Notre Dame unofficially in October. West Virginia, he officially visited last weekend, so see if West Virginia has enough scholarships to potentially bring Lucas Austin in, or if he gets a preferred walk-on spot. We've seen that before in cases like Bryce Biggs. So just a couple of guys to watch on that front. We'll see if any commits who aren't already committed at this point happen by next Wednesday, and I'll bring you a show on that and break that all down for you. So that kind of gives you a big scope or big picture of what retention, transfer portal recruiting, and high school recruiting is going on at this point. And again, West Virginia's got to prepare for a game in 13 days. So it's only perfect time as a segue to now talk about this Duke's Mayo Bowl. And the news on the Duke's Mayo Bowl front is all a good news in the case that West Virginia has sold out all of its ticket allotment. So it just shows Mountaineer Nation travels well, especially whenever it's in Charlotte, North Carolina. So kudos to all of you fans out there who have bought tickets already. If you're traveling to the Duke's Mayo Bowl and going for this game, I'd love to hear from you. Comment here on this YouTube video. Tell me how you feel about it. But really, I am having this feeling I did my ESPN Capital One Bowl Mania pick'em today, and there are so many games out there that are now affected by these opt-outs and the transfer portals movement that about half of these bowl games, maybe not even half, but 40% of these games look completely different. And I feel like that's the case for West Virginia and North Carolina in this game, namely because of North Carolina's side. How the spot on this game has, I think, slipped now to 5.5. Originally opened at, I think, 3. So now 5.5, and that's due to quarterback Drake May opting out as expected, projected probably top 2, top 3 quarterback for the NFL draft, could go as high as 1. So he's not playing in this game. The leading tackler on the defensive side of the ball, Cedric Gray, he's not playing. Leading receiver, Tez Walker, who North Carolina fought to get eligible to play for this year with the NCAA, he's not playing. Starting center Corey Gaynor, he's not playing. And the injuries have really piled up for North Carolina too. John Copenhaver and Bryson Nesbitt at the tight end position. Defensive back Will Hardy, Elijah Hussey, Zach Rice on the offensive line. So injuries and opt-outs, this isn't going to be the same North Carolina team. So that puts a damper. I feel like this is just a glorified spring game at this point in time, that North Carolina and West Virginia is going to be showing off most of who's going to be making an impact in 2024 in this game. So I still think it's intriguing for that reason alone, because I'm always projecting ahead, always looking at what's coming next for this program, what's down the line. But for North Carolina, you're fighting this battle without your best soldiers, as I use that analogy a lot. The news, and this is alleged, again, Good old Trust the Climb 23 on Twitter with this one. Allegedly, CJ Donaldson will not play in this game due to a torn labrum, which I am suspecting happened in the Oklahoma game, and then he decided to fight through it. What a warrior he is, through the Cincinnati game, through the Baylor game. What a tough player CJ Donaldson is. Love the guy. Hopefully he's able to rest up. So no Donaldson, no Zach Frazier. Already lost Justin Johnson to the portal, so West Virginia's going to be down to in the backfield Jaheim White, Jalen Anderson, who's still on the team, but again, I don't know for how long. Is it just this last 4 quarters, and then he's out the door, and DJ Oliver. So I'm wondering how that's going to affect the run game, and we'll see what happens. So that's really all I got to say about the Mayo Bowl. Again, I'll talk about the early signing day next week on Wednesday, and then I'll talk about the Mayo Bowl and a preview show for that game, our last preview video for the 2023 season on December 26th, the day before the game. So with these last 15 minutes, I want to spend talking about West Virginia basketball, and again, the news off the court being more intriguing, juicy than what happens on the court. West Virginia, we talked about in the last show, lost the backyard brawl at home, basketball, and then over the weekend played Drexel and squeaked one out with a Cook playing more minutes on in that game. West Virginia just pulled it out against the Drexel Dragons. So it just goes to show, how's West Virginia going to do against Kansas, against Texas, against Houston? Scary. But the biggest news is that this coalition of, I believe, 7 states, really headlined by the state of Ohio and West Virginia, really on behalf of RaeQuan Battle, in West Virginia's case, it was a lawsuit filed in the Northern District Court of West Virginia yesterday, and it was U.S. District Court Judge John Preston Bailey who granted a temporary restraining order against the NCAA, barring the association from enforcing a rule barring student athletes who have transferred multiple times to play immediately at their current school. So he wanted a 14-day window to rule on this issue officially. And the biggest news that happened today, if you were following across social media from not only West Virginia's own media members, but national media members, seeing this post from Nicole Auerbach of The Athletic, basically the NCAA saying that, that's not the case, going against this U.S. District Court's order. And there were players apparently who played in games who had transferred multiple times last night, and now the NCAA, it's unknown whether they're going to punish those players with a year's worth of eligibility for playing last night after this court case happened. And now they're putting out a statement and saying anybody who does play during this 14-day window will lose a year of eligibility. So it just sucks against the NCAA. I'm just had it. I already got in my cart the National Communist Against Athletes t-shirt that Brian Bosworth wore back in the 80s, that I just can't take it anymore. And I mean, people can be mad for the opening of Pandora's box and what can be an unforeseen consequence of if this ruling goes through, that you can have multiple transfers without penalty. But I'm just sick and tired of the NCAA being this governing body who has had this absolute hands-off approach to NIL and who dishes out punishment so unjustly over the course of the last 20 years. Namely, the biggest one, in my opinion, is not coming down on Kansas. I mean, you gave SMU a death penalty that affected them for the next 50 years. Kansas didn't even get a slap on the wrist. I don't even know what Kansas even was punished with, where it's been absolutely clear. Bill Self maybe the best best college basketball coach of the last like 20 years, overlapping with Coach K and Roy Williams and some of those others who have recently retired. But he is so dirty, he stinks to the high heavens. And I know that this was happening prior to, again, July 1st, 2021. But the NCAA cracking down, and in this case, the case in point, the camel that's broken the camel's back, that was the final straw, was this RaeQuan Battle situation, is pandering to these teams like Kansas and cracking down on teams like West Virginia. So West Virginia's got to stand up for itself. I'm not going to, hear the argument, or take any sort of blame necessarily, or take any responsibility that West Virginia should feel like it has to take any responsibility for trying to stand up for itself and doing what it feels is right for its own player. Now, Sean Alston, everything that happened with that NIL lawsuit that really changed the game, alongside with the Ed O'Bannon trials years ago that pretty much opened up Pandora's box for NIL. And again, I was at the worst absolute time, I feel like, with the COVID pandemic with that same time. But now everything that's happened with the transfer portal, you have been giving these subjective waivers to multiple transfers already to begin with. And that's why it got to this point in time with this trial, is that the NCAA was just willy-nilly, selectively on its own whim, giving out waivers, and West Virginia wasn't getting theirs. And also Kerr Kriisa was suspended for 9 games this offseason. So I've just had it with that whole organization and its treatment specifically to West Virginia. But again, because of its dereliction of duty from past decades, and now the way that it just subjectively gives favors to the haves and takes away from the have-nots, making it even more destroying the level playing field between the two. I'm done with it. I don't want to hear that. Let's open up Pandora's box at that case in time. You already have that with the grad transfer and with the one-time free transfer. So players can pretty much, if they want to stay 4 years, transfer twice anyway. So forget it. And I can tell you right now that coaches were going to be more selective with the way that they recruit. To keep, and if you have a good culture, if you have again, it all starts, and I get it. It ends all be all is your collective, and if you're tens of thousands of dollars apart between a West Virginia and a Duke, or I'm trying to think of another comparable program who hasn't necessarily had as much success but has a lot of money. I don't know if there necessarily is one, because I always sometimes go in tandem. But what's a good example here is if you're tens of thousands of dollars apart, these players are going to leave to go play for other programs. I've just accepted that. But if the money's comparable, if you have good coaching, you have all the other peripheral things, and the program has shown that it can move you along to becoming a star player in college, conference contender with the hopes of getting to the professional leagues, if that's where ultimately your goal is, and for most of them that's the case at the Power 4 level, then you're going to trust to stay if the money's comparable. I wholeheartedly believe that. That's why I'm saying these moves like Aubrey Burks trying to move to Ole Miss, if the money's equivalent, why? Why do you want to make this move to go to Ole Miss? Is what it is. So West Virginia has to do what it's got to do, I feel like, to get RaeQuan Battle. So I guess the billion-dollar question is, do you play him Saturday against UMass? With everything that's just come, I feel like it would just be a bit of a farce that you've taken this fight this far. This district court judge, has given you this 14-day window to not play RaeQuan Battle and Noah Farrakhan. Go ahead, do it, because I would rather West Virginia go and do it. At this point, just be punished, and you tried. But I think that this is evidence that I hope that this judge, John Preston Bailey, catches word of what the NCAA just said, and it's just this self-righteous, arrogant organization who tries to make its own rules and doesn't want to have to abide by, it creates its own law. Like, they are the law of the land. So I hope that this is finally a time where everybody's been saying, well, we need legislation, we need the courts, and we need the federal government to come in and start to regulate some of these things with the transfer portal and NIL. Like, here is the part where a government can go and backhand the NCAA into position right now and say you can't do this and give these people this opportunity. So I don't want to hear it that West Virginia has to necessarily take any sort of a blame or be responsible for this, that it has to do what it has to do for its players to be successful. Because ultimately, I feel like the NCAA is hanging by the legitimacy of the NCAA is hanging by a thread, especially given its president is already calling for a new subdivision out there, which basically has its own rules. So athletics being tied to the NCAA is hanging by a thread, and I also think athletics being tied to universities as a whole is on, I don't think hanging by a thread, but it's on shaky ground right now, is how these athletic departments in tandems with their collectives and how that all ties in with your university, and are these players there for an education? And if you're going to go and create your own new subdivision where you can create your own scholarship limits, does it mean sports are being cut? Does it mean scholarships are being cut? Does it mean that you have to have equal number of female athletes to equal number of male athletes, or do you need to have equal number of female teams versus equal number of male teams with Title IX? It's chaos. It's absolutely chaos right now. And with that being said, with this chaos, West Virginia needs to do everything that it can for itself to not care about this National League, to not care about the Big 12 Conference, to take care of its own and position itself to be as best as it possibly can for the future. So I think that's all I need to be said for that. I am happy to see Kirk Kriisa coming back for the UMass game. So if Kriisa gets back, you play RaeQuan Battle. Josh Eilert has said he's looking for West Virginia to potentially add for the spring semester. So West Virginia could bring another player onto the team for the second half of the season. That's a storyline in and of itself. It's crazy. Who knows if can you get Omar Silverio back, who was denied a waiver by the NCAA as a 2-time transfer? I don't know. Could you throw him? I don't know. He's being boys with Jose Perez. I don't know if maybe necessarily he doesn't want to have anything to do with West Virginia or at this point, or he's moved on and doing something else. Who knows? But it's crazy. It's chaos in football. It's chaos in basketball. We just got to sit back and just watch what happens. Watch the wheel turn, as the Amazon series Wheel of Time says. So very interesting. Love to hear what you think of this video. Please leave your comments here on YouTube or catch me on Twitter at Carson_Fox27. It's wild right now. So if you like this video, like it so more Mountaineer fans can see it across YouTube. Hit that subscribe button. Really appreciate all you all who tune in and have subscribed for this entire season and embrace the chaos like I do. And I can bring you not only the news, I feel like, of what's happening, but my own little spin on it at the same time. So if you like this, check out some of my other videos, subscribe to my channel, and tell your friends, tell your family, tell your dog that I do this each and every week and have a lot of fun doing it. I love Mountaineer Nation to the bottom of my heart, so thank you for tuning in. And we'll be back next week on Wednesday to talk about the early signing day and what West Virginia does with its class of 2024 football recruits. Hail West Virginia, let's go.